Okay, I'm Andrew. This is going to be a speed run of IFR, Flight Simulator, for the Commodore 64. We're going to pick difficulty of 0, that's our settings for this speed run, and get going. So this is the lowest difficulty, no wind and turbulence. We've hit the F1 key to throttle all the way up. I'll explain what these instruments are as we go through it, but first notice on the very left the throttle is at full and this airspeed indicator is going past 50, 75, and now at the very top you can see we are pitching up, and then all the way on the right we can see that the altimeter is increasing. So we have a positive rate of climb, we pull the gear up, those little 3 flashing gear indicators were there. Now that wheezing sound, that's the stall horn. You shouldn't be hearing that. I didn't fly this so well. That means we're pulling too much G's for the airspeed that we're at. We're basically, if you look at this depiction on Airport 1, we took off to the north. The heading indicator is there. We're going past 070 on the heading now. We're basically taking off north and doing a tight racetrack pattern at full throttle. Not more than a mile or a half mile away from the runway, and then going to come back around and land right at the airport that we've landed on. This speed run you have to land at all 4 of the 4 airports in this game. We're going to land at Airport 1 that we took off of, just so that we don't have to fly back to it again. That's going to be the fastest way through for this speed run. So we are now headed nearly south. This is the map that is part of the game manual, and basically you might notice there's no moving map on the screen. The whole point of this game is you have to fly using some simulation of flying instruments. Basically you have to work out where you are on this map from the information given. And the most useful piece of information for navigating is this north and west latitude and longitude indicators. So you can see that we are north 37, and on this runway, the south end we're going to land on, the south threshold is north 44. These units are tenths of a mile, so right now we're 1 mile south of this runway. The west position is 50, and we're at 40, so we're basically a mile away from the runway laterally, and we're about 2 miles, within 2 miles south of it. We're turning base now, basically. We've turned from south to west by hard banking to the right. We're going not full throttle anymore, but still nearly 200 knots, around 200 miles per hour. And there's a conversion factor, but for the sake of this lo-fi game, I'll use knots and miles per hour interchangeably. This airspeed indicator, we're still going 150, so we're going fast. And if you notice, we are at 120 above sea level altitude. That's very low. We're only like 30, we're within 30 feet above the ground at this point. I'm not meaning for it to be this low, actually. You can see by the north indicator, we've now finished our final turn, so we're pointing due north. We're at 50.2. That is on the west side of the runway, but we're correcting. We're now lined up with the runway. But we're still 2 miles south of it. You can look at this other instrument as doing something meaningful now, the localizer, that vertical needle that is now lined up with the little circle there. That corresponds to that 50.0. We're lined up directly with this runway that has a localizer. Still a mile to the south of this threshold. No, less than that. Excuse me, only 0.2 of a mile, so we're very close to it, but we're still less than 100 feet above the ground. So the landing technique we're doing for this speed run is stay low to it, get basically right on top of the threshold, and then drop the gear and put down the flaps and slow down as close as we can, or as fast as we can. No, we're at 48. That's like 0.4 of a mile into the runway. The runway is 1.2 miles long, so we're about a third of it before touching down. And that was good. We were only a little bit within 10 feet, and we reached a full stall just in time to land, and we've come to a stop within the first half of the runway, so that's decent. Now when we come to a complete stop here, you might have noticed at the bottom right the fuel gauge has replenished. Basically, there's 4 airports in this game. We have to land at all of them. Airports 1 and 2 refuel you if you come to a complete stop on them. So our strategy is going to go refuel at airport 1, the same one we took off from, and then we'll hit the 2 remaining airports, and then the final one, all with without any more fuel stops in between. So we're taking off again. We'll have a look at this map to kind of get the plan. So this is airport 1. We've flown this right-hand racetrack pattern. We're now going to go north, but not too far, not all the way up to 75, and then we're going to turn left, and we're going to go towards airport 4 next. What you can see on this map is that there's a southeast region that's at altitude 80 feet, and that's where the first 2 airports are. To get to the west part of the map, where there's the other 2 airports, you have to go through a pass. Basically, there's this cliff here that's 600 feet, so we're making sure to do a left-hand turn towards airport 4 before reaching that cliff. We're still only going to be going at 150 feet above, within 100 feet above the ground on this leg from airport 1 to airport 4. So we're going to just stay south of that 600-foot cliff. So fuel management is going to be the main concern that drives the planning of this trip, since we aren't going to have any fuel stops in between here and airport 4, and then have to make it to 3 and 2 also without refueling. We're not going to be doing the rest of the legs at this full throttle the whole way. So we'll be going at some cruise speed between 100 and 130 knots. The reason why we have to conserve so much fuel is because the kind of main event in this path through these airports is a long climb. We have to climb all the way up to around 3,000 feet in order to make this mountain pass, and that's going to be the maneuver that uses up the most of our fuel. What other instruments could we talk about here? We've mentioned the airspeed, this attitude, horizon indicator, the altimeter. This vertical speed indicator is telling you nothing that you couldn't infer by looking at the rate of the needle and the altimeter, but it's your rate of vertical speed. This is useful for knowing if your landing is good enough, depending on the difficulty setting. You have to land at a low enough vertical speed. 500 descending is the bar that we have to reach at this lowest difficulty setting. This is more useful, this isn't so useful the way that we're doing these aggressive landings for the speedrun. If you were playing this game closer to how it was intended as a simulation for real instrument flying, and you were flying ordinary final approach courses using the glide slope and localizer, you might use this vertical speed gauge to help you stick to the glide slope, but it's not going to play a big run in the speedrun. You have a turn and bank indicator that's basically your turn coordinator information. It's telling you your rate of turn. That little needle marker should be a standard rate of turn, but that's kind of slow. Again, not relevant for the speed run. We're doing this crank and bank aggressive turns. This would be more important also if there was rudders in this game, but basically the only controls in this game are your joystick buttons go pitch, roll, you can go pitch up and down, you can bank left and right. The steeper you bank, the faster your heading is changing, but also it affects your stall speed, affects your drag. So all of those flight models are modeled fairly accurately. I say fairly accurately. It's a really simplistic little flight model, but it's meant to seem kind of realistic. The challenge in the game really comes from kind of 2 things. One is the controls, like you just have to stare at that window and try to track a desired heading, or track some of these needles, or these GPS, more likely these GPS coordinates are what you kind of steer with. And then the other part of the challenge is basically just knowing where you're headed. Being on the right segment, even though there's not really a whole lot that helps guide you. We're pretty close now, only a mile into this airport 4. So there we're bringing the gear down, starting to slow down. This looks like this is going to be a little bit of a dragging it in. I think that we're going to have to add more throttle here. we started slowing down too early, basically. There's still another half mile to go, but we've already dropped most of our speed. We're probably going to hear the stall horn in a second. I have to keep throttling up. Yeah, this wasn't as efficient. This would be a room for improvement to bring this landing a little bit more, like we're burning fuel by being at high throttle with the flaps out and the gear out at the slow speed of 75. There's the stall horn. We have to make sure to make it past the threshold of the runway, otherwise it won't count as a landing. But we're burning more fuel than we should here. There we go. That was good enough, and right on the center line. This airport's just a touch and go, so no coming to a complete stop. We just throttle right back up. And then the main challenge here is we're taking off right headed towards this 10,000 foot cliff. But we're going to make a left-hand turn. If you look at this west coordinate, 117, we're still, we're taking off and we're still in the first half of this runway. Not a good sign to hear the stall horn on takeoff. The stall horn is going off around 70, but we won't actually stall unless we are at, I think, 58. So there's some speed range where we're still flying. Maybe we're getting a very aggressive performance, but the stall horn's going off. So that's okay. That's just part of the speedrun approach here. Again, there's a way to play this game that would be trying to simulate real IFR flying. It's just very different than the speedrunning approach. So we need to make sure not to hit this cliff. And the way that we're going to fly this next segment is we're going to start by doing this left-hand climbing turn. So because we have to go above the 600-foot cliff, we have to climb kind of away from that and then keep climbing while doing a whole 270-degree turn around to the left. So we're still just turn past south, still climbing. We're trying to climb at this ideal airspeed of 90. That's the best rate of climb. And we're going to be doing it at full throttle because we are eventually going to have to get up to 3,000 feet, burning a lot of fuel to do it, but that's how we're going to cross this mountain pass. And then once we're at the mountain pass, then we'll do a rapid descent to airport 3, and then a very simple cruise from 3, just skirting above the ground to airport 2. So that's the plan. What else to say? We talked a little bit about that localizer as it was coming in. There's also another navigation aid, this direction finder. I guess there's a third also. There's this distance. Here I've entered in, you can press I to toggle between the ILS pointing at the 2 different airports that have an ILS, and the distance that's telling you the total distance in miles to it. The way that I feel about this game is that it's kind of too hard and too easy in some ways. Because you have this north and west indicator, there's really no need to figure out where you are using the VOR, using the navigation instruments, like you would learn in training to fly on 6-pack navigation. So you can figure out exactly where on the map you are. And because all of the airports are north to south or east to west, you can also use those like as navigation aids to make sure that you're not drifting off of course. And as a result, you really don't need to look at any of the other instruments for navigating. You would just follow the north and west coordinates. So kind of makes the game too simplified that way. Anyway, the next part is we're going to keep going at this full throttle. I'm showing off here kind of the airplane facts in the manual. The manual has this list of speeds you stall at different flap configurations, and the only thing that matters for the speedrun is the best rate of climb. So I'm basically controlling the airplane by the pitch in order to try to keep it keep this airspeed as close to 90 as I can, and that's how I know I'll be making the most efficient climb that I can. Something else I need to be ready to respond to here is you have 2 fuel tanks and you have to manually switch between them. My plan here, again, not what you would normally do in an aircraft with 2 tanks, but I'm going to, for this speed run, try to run the left one completely dry until the game gives me a throttle down indicator, and then I'll quickly switch to the right tank and throttle back up. I think that it's easy to miss this a little bit, so we'll see how well I do. If you miss it, then you come close to stalling if the plane pitches down. We'll see. So there I'm out of fuel on the left tank. I should have pitched down. You know, throttling up with the Commodore 64 buttons takes a long time. I think it can't process too many different inputs at the same time, so if you pitch down and try to throttle up at the same time, you aren't achieving it. Anyway, we're back up to the climb. We're still heading just north. We're east of the mountain ridge. We need to get the altimeter. We're at 2,000 now. We want it to go all the way around to 2,880, and then that's the altitude according to this map that we can cross this mountain pass for. And again, I know that this mountain pass is at 100, so I am half of a mile away from that and still pointed north. And it starts at 128 west. I'm not yet. I'm about a mile away from that. So that's really the only navigation that I have to do here. The story of this game is pretty interesting. This was made by an independent developer in his spare time. This Ron Wantaja guy. Wantaja? I'm not sure I've ever been able to find out how his name's pronounced. He was a space engineer with the Air Force and then with Boeing. And he made this game as a hobby project to settle a bet about whether it was possible to fly using number printouts like this heading indicator and these GPS coordinates versus needles like you see in the airspeed indicator and altimeter the way that it's modeled in this game. And after he made it as a hobby project, he made a deal with a publisher and got like several years of salary worth of royalty payments in the first year that it was sold by this publisher. The publisher was academic, and I learned all of this from this nice blog post that Ron has that explains the story behind this game. You know, I've seen hardly one other YouTube video playing this game, and it doesn't go through a whole playthrough, let alone a speedrun. But the blog post is really fun to read and kind of illuminating. Well, anyway, the conclusion of that story, or the fun part of that story, was he got like a year's worth of orders. He had his game ready in time for Toys R Us to have it available for the Christmas sales. And basically he made a lot of money in royalties during this first year of Christmas sales. You could have bought this game in 1983 around Christmas time at a Toys R Us. He was able to make enough money from this programming this game to buy his own airplane. I thought that was a pretty cool story. And I guess your kids at Christmas time could have tried to figure out what to do with this game. It's a really obscure game. I mean, there's no it's not like an ordinary flight simulator. There's no vision of the outside as such. It's just you're looking inside at these instruments. There's, it will tell you how many airports you go to, but otherwise it's an open world simulator. It doesn't really tell you what you should do. It even comes with a little editor where you can just jump to any location you want by entering in the altitude and numbers, your position and latitude, longitude coordinates. So really that's all there is to the interface of the game. You'll see what the score sheet looks like at the end. So it's a pretty abstract little game. Anyway, we've just passed this the west edge of this pass, so we are now out of the pass. What we have to do now is a really aggressive descent. We've come out of that mountain pass, we're turning right to head north. We need to be on the center line of Airport 3, which is at 152, so we're pretty close, but a little bit to the east of it. And this threshold is at 162, so we're about a 5-mile final here. And it's the same thing, well, it's not the same at all. In the other landings we've been cruising in only 100 feet above the ground. Here we are coming in on this steep descent. We're still at 2,500. Have throttled back to nothing. We can't throw the gear out or do much more than put the flaps out and still make it in time and still have enough fuel left. So basically this is the right kind of glide path that should get us there. but we have to lose this about 2,000 feet. We need to get down to 40 in order to land, so, and we only have 4 miles left now. So basically we're doing about as, 0 power, full rate of descent. Basically it's a pretty aggressive descent. At least we're already lined up fairly well. This run setting is low difficulty. Some of the options are you can configure the difficulty for the amount of wind and turbulence. So we still have 1,000 feet to go, and 1.5 miles, 2.5 miles. We're doing such an aggressive rate of descent, I think we're going to end up putting some throttle back in. We're already descending fast enough to make it to the threshold at the right height. I think we're starting to slow down a bit as well. There's nothing like an autopilot for this game, so even though some things are simplified, like there's no rudder that you have to manage, turning is still fairly tedious because you don't have anything like an autopilot that will follow a fixed heading for you. I mean, it's easy enough if you have it's easy enough to track a heading with this low difficulty because there's no turbulence. Otherwise, you would constantly be having to make lateral course adjustments, lateral heading adjustments rather. We still have about a mile until this threshold here. We are still laterally lined up well. We still have 300 feet to go, so we're bringing the gear out. This is another one where I don't want to put in all of the flaps too quickly, so I'm adding a bit of throttle back in. And I'm still a little more than 100 above the ground. At the higher settings of difficulty, you have to land with less vertical speed. So we have a limit of about 500, which that 45-degree direction would be about 500. This looks a little bit less than that. And at the highest difficulty setting, it has to be within 300. I think that's about the amount. There, we've just cleared the threshold, so we can land anytime we want now. I think this was a particularly good landing. We're nearly a full stall right as we cross the threshold. So this is good. We're going to be stopping within about 0.2 of a mile from the threshold. That was good. That was like a short field landing. And again, there's no need to come to a full stop because we're not getting fuel from this airport. So really this was a touch and go. This is something that could probably be improved for the plan for this speed run is these are trying to be full stall landings, but there's really no reason to land at a low rate of speed for this speed run. So I think that these landings could be done a little bit different technique, and that might be a little bit faster overall. We are taking off again at full throttle, but from airport 3 to airport 2, and then we'll be done. We just fly this one again like normal, about 100 feet off the ground, and at whatever speed we choose to. It's not very far from airport 3 to airport 2, the final one, so it looks like we have more fuel in reserve than we're really going to need. The speed run could probably be improved by finding some way where we could use more fuel. Maybe we should be burning at nearly full throttle when we're crossing that mountain pass. I don't think that there's anywhere else that we could do that. We could keep in a little bit more speed on the approach to Airport 3, and then put more drag in earlier and you know, descend less at a less efficient airspeed. That would be another way. So yeah, there's a few different ways I could imagine improving this speedrun. It's just a starting point. So we're looking to line up with Airport 2 here. We could be trying to fly this with the localizer. So 2 of the airports have an ILS and localizer. Usually it's like, this game seems to want you to fly the back course, which is kind of a little bit harder. The needle moves backwards, but yeah, I guess I've already explained this, but you know, I think this game would be a lot more interesting if you couldn't navigate using these GPS numbers on the, which would already be not really possible for you if the runways were aligned at an angle rather than just north, south, east, west. And if that were the case, then you'd have to fly by this localizer. The other thing that I think might be interesting is if this actually had approach procedures, and if you could get yelled at or lose points if you did something that was violating the approach procedures. So you shouldn't be allowed to just cruise, you know, 100 feet off. Like you should have to, once you hit the final approach fix, you should actually have to stick to the glide slope the whole way down. I think that would make the game more interesting. In other words, I'm not saying that the game needs to be more fun. I like the idea that you can't see where you are on a map. All you have to use is these crude instruments. I guess I'm saying that this game doesn't go far enough because it doesn't realize just how simplifying these position readouts are. When you train to fly with just the old school conventional navigation instruments, they're just needles, and you don't even get as much help knowing where to, knowing which ones you've tuned into. What else? Normally there would be a bunch of other checklist items, like you're not dealing with anything about getting a clearance, you don't have to worry about your landing lights, or I guess managing the fuel tanks according to the proper procedure. So it'd be interesting if this had like a task saturation game overlaid on it as well. So the needle is going the wrong way, but it doesn't matter. We're within, well, we're close. We need to go a little bit more north. So for this to work, we need to be pointing a little bit more to the north. Actually, even though we are, you know, we've already crossed the threshold, but we are, you know, 1/100th of a mile too far to the south. So it's actually going to be important to make sure that we don't botch this landing. So we're going to throttle up a bit. We need to make sure that we cross the one. Okay, now we can land at any time. We're past 199.8. We're on the runway. So we're landing a little bit longer, like a half mile past the threshold. But that's okay, at least we managed to land on the runway. What's another space-saving thing we could, or time-saving thing we could do? I'm coming to a complete stop here, but really I should just press X. You press X to end your flight. And if I pressed X right now, it would have counted it as a landing, and I could be done. Alright, well there I go, came to a complete stop. You saw the fuel get recharged. So that completes the leg. And there we go. This took 29 minutes and 4 seconds, and that was my grand tour of the IFR game.